Before Halloween's laughter, there was silence, only the sound of church bells drifting through the cold and the soft tremor of candlelight over names carved in stone. Europe didn't fear the dead, it dined with them. In the dim glow of chapel windows, families whispered prayers not for monsters, but for mothers, fathers, and children who'd slipped into the other world. There was a time when the night belonged to memory, when every flicker of light was a language, a way to say you are still here. Before masks and pumpkins, before tricks and treats, the continent moved to the rhythm of mourning.
Every soul had its season.
Every death had its day. Europe's nights were not haunted by fear, but by love, the birth of all saints. It began in Rome, the city of ruins and resurrection. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV stood before the great Pantheon, a temple once dedicated to every Roman god. Its marble floors had echoed the prayers of Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, but in 609 AD, Boniface ordered it transformed, reconsecrated to all Christian martyrs. Pagan idols were torn down and their place filled with the bones of saints. This act was more than religious symbolism. It was a turning point. Pagan festivals like Lemuria, and where Romans
offered black beans to appease restless spirits, were being replaced with
prayers for redemption. The ancient harvest rites of Samhain from Celtic lands found new purpose too. What once was fear of wandering ghosts became devotion to departed souls. Yet even in its sanctity, the new faith absorbed echoes of the old world. Early Christians, longing for connection, often slept beside tombs of the martyrs. They believed saints could visit dreams, bringing healing, guidance, or forgiveness. To them, the grave was not an end. It was a threshold. It was said that the veil between heaven and earth thinned during these nights, that those who prayed among relics could feel the breath of the divine. Candles were not just light, they were invitations. Come, they seemed to say, the living remember. Medieval Europe. The candle. Vigil by the Middle Ages, remembrance had become ritual. The Church declared November 1st as All Saints' Day, and the next day, All Souls' Day, was for every forgotten name that heaven might have missed. The nights in between were alive with faith and fire. Across the countryside, the sound of bells echoed for the souls in purgatory. In some villages, the ringing lasted from sunset to sunrise. It was believed that each toll freed one suffering spirit. Monks kept watch in candle-lit choirs, their chants rising like smoke through cold stone halls. In the cottages beyond the abbey walls, ordinary families lit candles on their doorsteps, believing the flames would guide wandering souls back home for one final visit. The air smelled of beeswax and bread, for these were the nights of the soul cakes. Each cake was round, golden and marked with the sign of the cross. For every cake given, a prayer was promised. One for you, one for your soul still on its journey. Children, known as soulers, roamed from house to house singing hymns and collecting cakes in exchange for prayers. Their little songs echoed in the night, a sound both joyful and solemn. It was a tender paradox. The first trick-or-treaters in history were not seeking candy, but mercy. By the 14th century, this ritual spread across Europe, from the misty moors of England to the forests of Germany and France. The line between folklore and faith blurred beautifully. Candles, bells, cakes, and chants, each an act of love dressed as superstition. In some regions, people left food and drink out for unseen guests, believing the dead might dine in spirit. Farmers even set a single place at the table for their ancestors. In the glow of candlelight, one could almost believe the invisible were seated among them, watching, listening, blessing. Europe's autumn nights were not dark at all. They shimmered with remembrance. The Protestant Reformation's shadow, but by the 16th century, the candles began to dim. A storm was coming, the Protestant Reformation, and with it, a ruthless campaign against what reformers called idolatry and popish superstition. Prayers for the dead were condemned as frauds. The belief in purgatory was declared a dangerous illusion. In England, Scotland, and parts of Germany, the old vigil was outlawed. Candles on graves were snuffed out. The once sacred All Hallows' Eve turned into something else entirely, rebellion and ridicule. In Protestant lands, bonfires took the place of Mass. Bells no longer tolled for souls. They rang to celebrate reform. In time, All Hallows' Eve in England merged with the story of Guy Fawkes, a failed Catholic conspirator. The night of mourning became bonfire night, where effigies burned instead of candles. Remember the 5th of November, they sang. The saints replaced by sparks, but not everyone obeyed. In hidden corners of the countryside, widows still lit candles behind shuttered windows. They prayed softly, afraid to be heard. The smell of wax in the dark was a quiet rebellion, a whisper of the old faith, refusing to die. A traveller's journal from 1620 describes seeing faint lights scattered across the English hills on All Hallows' Eve, candles burning like ghosts in the fields. He thought them witchcraft. In truth, they were grief, disguised as flame. The Reformation had stripped Europe of many of its rituals, yet no decree, no doctrine could erase the human need to remember. The Victorian revival centuries passed. The world changed. The Industrial Revolution replaced candlelight with gas lamps, prayer books with newspapers, and grief with progress. Cities grew. Science triumphed. The sacred became sentimental. And yet, memory refused to die. In the 19th century, the Victorians brought the light back. But it was different now. Less a flame of faith, more a flicker of feeling. Queen Victoria herself, after losing Prince Albert, transformed mourning into a national art form. The black dress, the veil, the portrait of the lost. These became the new sacraments of sorrow. Death entered the parlour, not as a priest, but as a painter. Graveyards were redesigned into gardens. Marble angels spread wings over manicured lawns. Families kept mourning books, pressed flowers, or wore jewelry made from the hair of the deceased. Every object became a relic, not of sainthood, but of sentiment. Candlelight vigils returned, not in churches, but in drawing rooms. Poets like Tennyson and Rossetti wrote verses for the departed. Photographers captured the still faces of the dead, sometimes posed with the living in haunting family portraits. These were not morbid acts. They were attempts to keep memory breathing. The Victorians turned grief into beauty, and in doing so they rediscovered something Europe had almost forgotten, that light is not only for the living. Romanticism swept across Europe, and with it came a strange nostalgia for lost rituals. People yearned again for candlelight, processions, the poetry of loss. Writers spoke of ghosts not as horrors but as echoes of love. Death became less a punishment and more a presence. Something soft, almost sacred. By the late 1800s, All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day were celebrated once more in Catholic Europe, in Italy, Spain, France, and Ireland. The candles returned to the cemeteries, burning through the mist like 1,000 tiny suns. Children watched, wide-eyed, as their parents whispered names long gone, teaching them what it meant to remember. The old Europe of bells, bread, and flame, Tichewund was reborn in fragments, not as religion alone, but as ritual, Europe once believed the dead deserved a light. Perhaps that's why even now we still light candles at graves in cathedrals, windows when storms rage outside. The act is ancient, instinctive, older than creed or scripture. When you light a candle for someone you've lost, you are repeating a gesture made by Romans in the Pantheon, monks in stone cloisters, widows in Reformation England, and mothers in Victorian parlours across 15 centuries. The flame has never truly gone out. It has simply changed hands. The candle that once guided souls through purgatory now glows at vigils for peace. The same flame that once flickered in abbeys burns today for victims of war, for lost children, for loved ones we can't let go. The form changed, but the meaning stayed. Every generation must find its own way to remember, and every act of remembrance, no matter how small, keeps history alive. Perhaps in the end, Europe's greatest inheritance was not its cathedrals or kings, but this, a simple belief that no one truly dies as long as someone remembers to light a flame. Because somewhere, deep in the night, every candle still whispers the same message across centuries: you are not forgotten.